Well, thanks for staying with us on the program this morning as we look to review headline stories and open the discourse as it pertains to national issues making the rounds. Joining us to review headline stories this morning is the business editor of the New National Star newspaper, Mr. Sam Otuoye, who joins us virtually from Abuja this morning. Hello, Mr. Sam. Good morning to you and welcome to the program.
Good morning and thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. Coincidentally, we'll be beginning with one of the major headlines making the rounds this morning, also the lead story on the front cover of your newspaper. And this is as it pertains to the visit of the EU mission to the INEC chairman's office, in which they cited flaws in the 2023 general elections and are recommending an electoral legal framework review. Your newspaper does tell us that they made about 23 point submission to the INEC, and the INEC says it has addressed 8 of those. Can you shed more light to this lead story and give us some insight?
Yeah, thank you so much. You see, the electoral reforms that Nigeria has been clamoring for, even after the 2023 elections, that we are marred with a lot of irregularities, including the IREV, that in fact the word glitch, that was the first time we heard it in our electoral system, that there was a glitch and all of those. So EU was here to observe that election, and they went away with a lot of impressions, which they've come to documented and presented to Nigeria, as in, look at the things we saw, look at the flaws, and look at the recommendations we have made. And of a truth, everybody in Nigeria knew and saw those things they mentioned. So it's not like they're telling us something new. Thank God for INEC that accepted that, yes, there were flaws and irregularities and all of those, and that they're working on them and all that. And the EU has come out to say, look, there were so many legal issues that should have been tackled. And those are the things they presented now, including operational issues, right? So what we expect INEC to do and Nigeria to do, the legislature, is to look into those things they've mentioned, those irregularities they've mentioned, and work on them. The legal framework should be done, and the operational framework should also be done. We know what happens concerning operations and all of those, even in 2023 election, which was adjudged very transparent in terms of people were ready for it and all of those before the glitch and all of those happened. So all those things that they've pointed out, we need to work on them as a country, right? EU was, I think they had over 100 representatives at the time, from different countries of Europe, So they couldn't have come out to tell us what is not true. But all we know is that we have electoral challenges and issues that we must address as a country. All the hula-baloo of the glitch that happened and how it happened and all of those, we all know those intrigues. And Nigerians wouldn't want those things to happen again. So the earlier we address our electoral system issues, the better for the country. We don't even need EU to tell us what should be done and the observations. We Nigerians observe those things as well. So for me, it's no news. The only thing is that it has gained international perspective, which is good for us to now see, at the international level, Nigeria is not doing well concerning electoral reforms and electoral issues. So it's good we tackle them and we address them as a country.
Now, Mr. Sam, it's no news that this is very glaring, particularly off the back of a lot of attention placed on the 2023 general elections, as it were. But the major challenge this morning is a perceived delay on the part of the legislative arm of government. INEC has said that 8 out of the 23 items submitted by EU's mission are administrative, which it has taken up responsibility and has addressed. But the large bulk of the work falls on the constitutional reform, which lies on the table of the National Assembly. In that response, how pertinent is it that the National Assembly expedite action in lines with calls from the INEC chairman, Professor Mahmood Yakubu?
Yeah, our National Assembly has had issues of independence. And it's not because they can't do it, it's because of interest. Because they've fused themselves into the executive. That is the problem we're having. If National Assembly stands up to say, look, we'll do our work, we'll checkmate the executive, some of those things will be done away with. But when they rapport and romance with the executive, you find it difficult to differentiate between the legislature and the executive. So the delay we are having in the electoral reforms, the constitutional amendment, is not a function of National Assembly cannot do it. It's a function of the meddlesomeness, between the National Assembly and the executive. And this falls on the table of the leadership of the National Assembly. The leadership must sit up. The leadership must see Nigeria first before the romance they're having with the executive, because that is why we're having a challenge, right? So the earlier they come out with constitutional reviews and electoral reforms and all of those before 2027, the better for everybody, the better for Nigeria. And that is what EU has said, that before 2027, this issue should be addressed so that the repeat of those irregularities and those malfeasance will not occur again. So what we are saying is the civil society organizations, right? The MBA and all of those, they should put pressure on National Assembly to do the needful and as clear as possible. The media should also put pressure on National Assembly. They should highlight them. They should let them know that, look, you can't delay further on these issues of national interest, high national interest. So I think that is the way to go. The media, the civil society organization should put pressure on the National Assembly, because if you wait for them to come out with those things, they know what they're waiting for and they know what they're doing. They know the effect, they know the impact of not coming out with those reforms and those reviews on time.
Now, Mr. Sam, there's some speculation about a replacement for the current INEC chairman, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, and not to say that INEC has not also done its homework, because apart from the EU's recommendation, a 23-point recommendation, the INEC had submitted 146 recommendations to the National Assembly, and some of those 6 priority areas border on: 1, ambiguity in the law in terms of post-judicial judgments given on electoral cases. There's also the issue of impunity for electoral offenders. It almost seems as though those who snatch ballot boxes or are caught vote buying during elections go unpunished. They're also recommending protection for media practitioners and persons who report about elections. These are some of the 6 priority areas that have been raised. Looking at the weight of these recommendations, I know it's voluminous. There's the notion that it always gets swept and kept on shelf 14. How pertinent is it to ensure that there's public trust restored, particularly with the prosecution of electoral offenders, the removal of those ambiguities in terms of interpretations of judgments, and the protection of journalists in their civic duty to report on these election cases? And beg your pardon, I almost forgot the need for transparency in terms of having this election result accessible in real time. Let's get your take, sir.
The question is a loaded one. Let me say this. You see, INEC has submitted all these things, just as I said earlier. We know them. The issue of ballot snatching and all of those. But the question is, these people that are not prosecuted, who is backing them? You saw what happened during 2023 election in Rivers State, where one man took up the whole place and, rode roughshod on the state, and nothing happened. And the question is, why didn't anything happen? Powers that be, the political gladiators, they are the people doing all these things. That's why you don't see prosecutions, because the man that is coming out to snatch a ballot box is sent by somebody. and the person has been told, go, nothing will happen. We are here. What about the court judgments we'll get after elections? That's the same thing. So there's no transparency. What about IREV? Because we are talking about transparency. IREV that got glitched and all of those things. You see, we don't need to begin to mention these things one after the other because we know them and we know what happened and what happens in this country in terms of elections. And that is why EU is saying that, look, let's correct these things before the next election. But would they be corrected? Bito, I wonder whether they will be corrected because those people that have held sway onto our political system are still there and much will not change because if they allow things to change, things will go against the tide, against what they want, right? So that is the problem. The corruption in the system is at the bottom, at the foundation of what happens, even in this electoral system we are talking about and our elections. And they won't go away very quickly because those interests are still there and are very mounted. That is what you must underline. Those interests are mounted. So they're just not fleeting interests. No, they're mounted interests. Because if they don't happen, they will be shut out of the system. That is why it is so. So the people that are not being prosecuted are being protected by people. And the electoral frauds are being committed by the gladiators. I wrote a story some time ago. I wrote an article in the north where small boys were seen queued up on the line and they were asking them what their age was. You know, so you saw those things were alive. Even the police officers were there, but they couldn't get them out of the line. Right? So we unless we are ready as a country to change the situation, unless our leaders now rethink and say, oh, look, it's high time we change this system, nothing will work, nothing will go the right way. So that is where we are. The trust will never come back until something happens. That trust deficit will remain there because Nigerians don't believe the people that are leading us. That is what it is. But thank God, EU has spoken, and you know, when international organizations come into the country and say one or two things, what happens is that within a short period, Nigerians will do one or two things to make it look as if they're aligning. But at the end of the day, nothing will happen. They know what they're doing.
Now, Mr. Sam, before we get into the other subject to discuss this morning, there's a notion building that one of the first steps to rebuilding public trust will be in setting up a public accountability process for the selection of INEC members, and in particular, who succeeds Professor Mahmood Yakubu as the next INEC chairman. Do you think that this notion is right? And if so, how do we go about setting up this public accountability process?
Yeah, thank you very much. You see, during Jonathan's regime, Jonathan was trying to be as transparent as possible. And some names were thrown up that from the different regions, as it were, you know, because I remember one Professor Diala from the East, the INEC chairman, the one that won it from the North, was his name, Professor, what's his name again, you know, and all of those. Jonathan.
You mean Professor Atahiu Jega? Well, I'm sure Mr. Sam will rejoin us when his network has a better connection. But just to reiterate the question I'd asked him before he began making his point with reference to the selection of the INEC chairman during the President Goodluck Jonathan administration, is off the back of recommendations as submitted by the European missions, election observers mission in Nigeria, who yesterday were at the INEC office paying a visit on the INEC chairman to submit 23 recommendations on electoral reforms ahead of the 2027 general elections. INEC, in response to that, says 8 out of the 23 recommendations border on administrative responsibilities of INEC as a body. and that they had begun implementations of those recommendations. However, they were cautious to note that a large chunk of that border on constitutional and judicial reforms, which lie on the table of the legislator. The National Assembly has the honors to implement those recommendations, citing that INEC herself had submitted over 142 recommendations in its own. Now, there are 6 priority areas of some of those recommendations are submitted by the INEC. One of those is for transparency and public accountability to be instituted in the selection of INEC members, particularly with reference to who emerges the INEC chairman. This is at a time when the PDP is throwing allegations to the APC, saying that they are eroding the democratic process and urging that those who are selected be apolitical, devoid of any party affiliations. Another aspect is for the protection of women's involvement in politics. There's also another priority area on the need to remove impunity for electoral offenders and bring those involved in such practices to justice. There's the need to have access to election results in real time. One of the promises, if you would recall, were made by the current INEC chairman, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, which failed to pull through as it regards the glitch that was experienced during the transmission of results through INEV, through the IREF portal. Now, some of these priority areas are ones that have been noted as needing to be addressed with urgency ahead of 2027. It almost seems as though there is the notion that the National Assembly hasn't really been seen to be implementing this as insinuated by EU and the INEC, according to reports making the rounds. Whilst it's on record that the EU officials also acknowledged the improvements made by INEC, but noted that several recommendations from the 2023 EOM report remained unimplemented. Now, this lack of implementation is not just particular to Nigeria, but it's noted to be across Africa and the world. This is according to the EU chief, that's the EU chief of EU election observation follow-up mission to Nigeria, Barry Andrews. That was the statement he made. If I'm to quote him, let's take a look at the messages he put it, and I quote. He says, "We recognize that there are certain time constraints, both in terms of judicial reforms as well as administrative reforms, and of course, constitutional reform, which is much more difficult. But we are making all of these recommendations against international standards that the EU and Nigeria and most countries have signed up to. And so we are part of an overall international election observation ecosystem that is going to be served to a plethora of democracies to support democracy, not just here in Nigeria, not just in Africa, but across the world and in Europe as well." Unquote. So there you have it. That would rest that and would continue to have the dialogue around the build-up to the 2027 elections. And just to remind you, in line with our advocacy right here on the Advocate Broadcasting Network, that in your civic duty, it's a responsibility to hold judicial officers and government officials accountable. And without participating in the process, you can't hold them accountable. How do you participate would be the next question you might want to ask. It behoves on you to get your permanent voter's card. The online registration has closed. In-person registrations are ongoing across the nation. But for Anambra, ahead of the governorship elections, it's important to remind Nigerians that we must participate in the process. The INEC has made public the registrations recorded so far, and there have been over 2.6 million registrations and applications made to obtain PVCs since INEC flagged off the continuous voters registration exercise, and largely it's an improvement. But the worrying factor is that if we take some statistics from the 2023 general elections, where we had over 91.3 million registered Nigerians, those who participated in producing the results for the presidential election were shy of 1/3 of those figures, just about 23 to 33% of the figures of those who registered to participate. So all of these recommendations for judicial and constitutional reviews are timely so that we can enhance more participation in the electoral process. And the message again, once again, is re-echoed right here on the Morning Express program. Well, whilst we wait for Mr. Sam Otuoye's network to buffer, I would also look to broaden the next subject we'll be discussing in terms of giving you a background to it. So now that we have the coalition party officially adopting the African Democratic Congress ADC as a platform to have some key political figures, the opposition, to be frank, have adopted it, largely led by former Senate President Senator David Mark as chairman. It's on the figures who probably might be looking or vying for the flag bearer position of the ADC in 2027. And one of such persons, most notably, is the former Vice President Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, who has officially resigned his membership from the People's Democratic Party and picked up an ADC card. Now, whilst he has made his position clear, another strong contender is the 2023 Labour Party's presidential candidate in the person of Mr. Peter Obi, who is yet to renege his membership of the Labour Party and pick up the ADC card. Now, Mr. Atiku did grant an interview in which he says the interview is being misconstrued. This morning, major headlines are making the rounds saying that he has dismissed the notion that he will be stepping down for a younger candidate. Many are speculating by younger, he might be referring to the person of Mr. Peter Obi, who is yet to adopt the Labour Party's card ahead of 2027. Big debates on why that is not yet concluded at the moment. Whilst you have the likes of former River State Governor Rotimi Amechi officially adopted by the ADC, it's the notion that there would be a primaries contested by all, because that's the statement of the ADC National Chairman, Senator David Mark, who says that there would be no special considerations in the selection of the flag bearer of the party. Now, the Obedient Movement is issuing a statement on social media this morning, speaking on behalf of Mr. Peter Obi, saying that he would not participate in what they term to be a dollarized party primary. Now, and if you put two and two together off the back of this refutal as issued by the former Vice President, His Excellency Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, and the notion of the Obedient Movement on social media this morning, it's on the fate of Mr. Peter Obi, and who might emerge as ADC's preferred flag bearer. Now, it's not as straightforward as it may seem. Yes, going into the next few months, several political parties will be having their national convention to make positions and strong affirmations going into 2027. But there's also, many would call a dark horse in this race, the position of former President Goodluck Jonathan, who is still an active card-carrying member of the PDP. Now, it's also on the notion that these are the key figures that Nigerians might have to deal with in terms of strong contenders that might have a chance at ruffling the APC, as the APC has made a consensus on the return of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Now, whilst these are the congent issues, let's see if we can reconnect with Mr. Sam Otuoye this morning, if his network is better. If his network is not, we would also look at one major issue. And that issue is one that we had earlier highlighted, the position of the Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, who has talked about the role of the family. He says the current level of social decadence and insecurity we're witnessing in the country is because the smallest unit of the society, as it were, is failing. In a bit, we'll see if we can find those files for you to take a listen to what General Christopher Musa said. Once we have those files available, we'll bring them to you in a bit. Now, the CDS, more like reiterating a point that has been made over time about the need for societal values, core values that hold any society together. He believes that a breakdown in the family unit gives room for those recruiting persons into banditry, into kidnapping to thrive, saying that if the families were functional and on their duty, parents were mindful of where their wards and children are at all times, and are also dissuading them from participating in social vices, we might find that to be the key tool to fight insecurity across the nation. Now, let's take a look at some of the engagements that brought this to the forefront, because it was the major theme at the gathering where the CDS made this remark. Now, we always look to discuss and buttress the role of the family, but it almost seems as though it is most times overshadowed by the need for boots on grounds, guns on grounds. But we'll take a listen to the Chief of Defense Staff shortly, who made these remarks at the closing ceremony of exercise Haskebu, a joint security training organized by the Armed Forces Command and Staff College Jaji in Kaduna, where he was the special guest of honor and expressed his concerns over the growing insecurity in the Sahel, warning that criminal groups exploit porous borders, making unilateral responses ineffective. He also urged Nigerians to deny criminals safe havens within their communities and emphasize the importance of stronger regional cooperation through multi-joint task force to eliminate terrorists. Take a listen to General Musa here speaking.
That's the only way we can defeat all acts of criminality. We have seen that the Sahel is getting very hot. And it is by uniting all our efforts, uniting all the equipment we have, uniting our abilities, then we can defeat these enemies. Because the enemies we're dealing with do not respect borders. So if we hold on to our borders alone, then you will continue to suffer alone without the others. But if we unite and walk across, it makes it better. The multinational joint task force in Chad is showing us that example. That as brothers, as Africans, we must remember that we are brothers, we are family. That the security forces cannot win this battle alone without the citizens also contributing. Because the terrorists, the bandits, the criminals are living within the communities. And if the communities embrace them, you will give them a free haven. But if you deny them the ability to stay, they will not be able to.
Every strong nation is built by strong families, because the family is the foundation where morality, discipline, and patriotism are nurtured. Strong communities lead to strong nations. Conversely, weak families lead to chaos, radicalism, extremism, and the raising of individuals who, by all measure, are losers and will impose that sense of destruction on the society.
The system is failing, insecurity is growing, which means if we address the family issues, insecurity will go down. So that's why we want to encourage and build up this synergy, that citizens must understand that the family is important for our families to remain the way it is family, because that's where you have the discipline. That's why you have the regulations. That's how people grow up to understand what it is to be human, what it is to respect one another, what it is to love one another, which is critical to our success. So we are going out into the field. We want them to implement these things. Wherever they are, let them make everyone understand that family units are very critical to our success and security, and why we have to encourage families to continue to remain united. If families are united, then we are brothers keepers. And once we are brothers keepers, we will not allow harm to happen to any other person.
Now, highlights of that deliberation following the closing ceremony of Operation Haskebu in Jaji. Now, it's no news that the family needs to be united, but when you look at the current realities on ground, many families are torn between fending for their children and being able to provide. You know, the correlation between poverty and insecurity and growing crime rates and criminality in the society cannot be overemphasized. When you look at the structure of the armed forces, given this message more backing, it behoves on us to think that the first line in winning the battle against insecurity is not necessarily in terms of the boots and ammunitions the country has, but in ensuring that the smallest the unit has the power to be able to ensure that their wards and children are not preying grounds that can be easily recruited for crime. Now, you'd find highlights of this being the conferment of awards with over 600 participants who took place in the exercise. Now, this morning, in relation to part of the efforts by government to curb insecurity across different regions of the country, would revisit the earlier headline on the Punch newspaper. On the Punch newspaper this morning, we saw reports that following a rapid growth in bandit activities in Kwara State. The southwest states have had to form a joint position in terms of their response to this surge in banditry. Whilst the southwest is known for the Amotekun outfit, is the need for more heightened border community responses to tackle this growing issue. A leading story earlier on published by the Punch newspaper reads, Southwest states tighten borders amid banditry surge in Kwara. Straplines read, Oshun, Ondo deploy tactical teams, riot police in border communities. Southwest states fortified against attack, says Amotekun Corps. Intelligence agencies track bandits, plan containment. Eliminate criminal elements. CDS charges security forces. You see that strapline from the CDS comments, which we brought you more detailed reports in the clips we played for you just a minute ago, where he was reiterating the need for a joint position to tackle this growing form of insecurity. Now, many would argue that ever since the Boko Haram insurgency sprung up in Nigeria, the efforts of the armed forces in winning the war are commendable, but a lot needs to be done. Now, Southwest states have heightened their security following the surge in attacks in communities and killings by suspected bandits and terrorists in neighboring Kwara states. There's a meeting of security chiefs in Oyo, Osun, Ekiti, and Ondo, as confirmed to news reporters on Thursday. There were various commitments to enact a containment plan to prevent infiltrations of their states by bandits fleeing the ongoing military operations in Kwara. Now, this is off the heels of the federal government's uncovering of a movement of bandits heading in that direction. It was also gathered that the bandits who recently attacked several communities and killed many residents in Kwara were tracked by intelligence agencies to ensure they do not advance into Oyo and other southwestern states. Now, whilst this receives the much needed attention in the media, in the past few weeks, it's been quite disheartening to record surges in attacks in Kwara, particularly in the northwest axis. Now, on September 29, to be specific, suspected bandits killed at least 12 members of the local forest guard unit in Okeode in Efelodun local government area. And 6 days earlier, they also launched an attack in Idu local government area as well, where they abducted a woman and a teenage girl. These are some of the reports that continue to characterize the year 2025 in terms of the heightened level of insecurity across states in Nigeria. Now, at this point, let's rejoin Mr. Sam Otuoye, who joins us now. Hello, Mr. Sam. Welcome back to the discourse.
Thank you so very much.
Now, I would like your take now on this story making the rounds. The armed forces had a training where over 600 participants participated in the exercise, HASKEBU, and the Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, made mention that beyond boots on grounds and the ammunition needed to fight banditry and terrorism, that the family has a role to play to curb the growing rate of social decadence and insecurity in the country. Do you agree with him? And if yes, how can the family be better equipped to take on this fight in a matter of national security?
Thank you very much. You know, they say that the of nation build, that is the family that will start, the parents talking to their children, you know, right from the toddling age, before preschool and school and all of those. So yes, the family has a role to play, no doubt about that, because the bandits are from families. They were born by parents. So parents have the role to play in terms of training their children, telling them what is right and what is wrong. You see, I grew up having this conscience that I must go to church every Sunday, because while we are small, you must be forced to go to church. You go to church the Sundays, the children's Sunday school in the morning, you go that of the evening. And that thing molded me. Even while I was away from home, I was in the university, where nobody was, parents, nobody was after me, monitoring me. If I don't go to church 2 Sundays, my conscience will begin to prick me. The third Sunday, I must go to church. Even till today, that's the way I live my life. I have that conscience. It's a function of the training I got as a young person, as a toddler, as a growing up, the teens and all of those ages, before school. And in school too, the same training of moral, what would they call it? Moral instruction. Good, that was the name then. There was a session for moral instruction at the assembly ground, and teachers will tell you the do's and the don'ts, and even the subjects that were brought into schools. They call civic education and all those. Those are the things they talk about. So the parents, the families have roles to play. But beyond that, when the security situation has scaled above the families, it now gets into the hands of the security agencies, the army, the police, and DSS, and all of them. And they must also sit up and do their own work. The parents may fail at the level, because after telling their children what to do, and they get out there and start interacting, peer influence and all of those will also trickle in. And at that point, parents are no more there to handle. So it now moves to the segment of the security operatives. We should stand up to do their work. I agree with him, but are they doing enough at their own level? Because the insecurity in the country, particularly in the north, I think our second lead, New National Star second lead, our big story today was on what happened in Zamfara on October 1, where the bandits came and kidnapped councillors and all of those, even stole policemen, handset. Those guys were beside the police station, but they still came there to attack them. What it means is that they are not afraid of security people. And you see, our correspondent in Zamfara says something that the person he interviewed, said that all these Toji and all of those people have taken over, that even police don't even patrol. The military don't patrol. They don't. That's what the report said.
Now, Mr. Sam, on this report, we've also seen some meetings between security forces in certain northern states and these bandits who have come to some sort of arrangement. There's some levies paid in that regard. Those bandits are bold enough to come to those meetings wearing camouflages and bearing ammunition. What do you make of this growing trend?
Yes, thank you so much. I was coming there because when the army speaks in terms of what they are doing and the way the parents and the family should assist, yes. But when it gets to, just as I said, the matter has escalated beyond the families now, right? It's now in the hands of the military, the police, and all of those. But we now see something that is strange, where these negotiations are going place live with the bandits. And the bandits have taken over communities in the Niger, in Zamfara and all of those, Borno and all of those, and they're collecting taxes. I see, we don't need to overflog this issue. Even the military that is speaking to that issue, they know that there is a failure in that system. Otherwise, what is happening? In fact, what he said wouldn't have come up, because they would have taken care of the security situations, that the families won't be an issue anymore. But because something has gone wrong, and what has gone wrong is something that can be controlled, something that can be brought to book, because we know what the problem is. They know what the problem is as well. So it's not any rocket science that the bandits have taken over the north and they're just driving, collecting taxes and all of those. But I wouldn't want to say much because it's a security issue. But the point is that the military, the police, the DSS and other security agencies should rise up. They should utilize their votes to buy the necessary arms and ammunition, and also those guys that are in the trenches, the soldiers there. We've had situations where the soldiers in the trenches have revolted that the allowances are not being paid and are not being taken care of, and all of those. Those are the issues we are talking about here. And also there's this issue that is very concerning, very disturbing, that even they themselves, there are saboteurs within the security agencies that relate with the bandits. Give them information how these guys are coming. And you know, on this program, I've mentioned somebody, a soldier from my place, that they flew from Port Harcourt to go and pick up the dead bodies of some soldiers killed by bandits in the north, and they shot their plane, and that is how that cousin of mine died. I mentioned it in this program, and I was like, what kind of strategies are our security agencies putting in place when they know that, look, because these guys have killed these guys, right, the soldiers, they will look around to see whether there will be any rescue or the military, whether they will come to carry the dead bodies, and they know that they will attack them. So how come there was no intelligence to get out the fact that those guys were around waiting for any intervention, right? But those guys went there, and their plane was shot, and it crashed, and those guys died. You know, so these are some of the things they've not done well in their own aspect, much more the families.
Now let's bring it to some of the other ones that they're getting right.
Young family members.
Because in response to some of the banditry attacks, they are also being able to flush out certain bandits from their hideouts. And following the bandits' recent activity in Kwara, the southwest states have had to form a position on the need for collaboration in inter-border security. Let's get your take on this, because Amotekun is talking about intelligence speculating that Ondo and Osun need to tighten their border control to prevent these bandits from gaining access into their states.
Thank you so much. Even though I didn't hear the first side of the question, but I know what is going on in Kwara State. You know, that they're feasting on that state right now, which I think the military, the security agencies should have copped before now, because even before that thing started, they should have gotten intelligence. Now that they've taken over Kwara, and the Osun and the Ondo people, the border line, my worry is whether Amatuku can face those guys when they want to creep into those states. I wonder whether Amatuku is equipped to the point of checkmating them. That's my worry about Amatuku. So the military should take over again. The DSS should take over again those communities and curb that situation. Because just as Amatuku is concerned that the team might fester into their own zone, that's what happens. Whenever there's an issue, whenever there's banditry, and terrorism, before you know it, it will fester onto neighboring communities and zones. So Amatuku is right by getting ready, but I wonder whether they can face those guys. So the military, the DSS, the security agencies should sit up and face that situation squarely, because very soon Kwara will become like Borno, Kwara will become like Niger, Kwara will become like Zamfara. That is what it looks like. So the earlier they tackle that situation, that menace that is growing up there right now, the better for Kwara State and the West, as it were, because the border issues are always there. They must come in. They must, even when they are running away from the security agencies, they will escape into those areas. And by the time they escape into those other areas, they will begin to form their cartel there, and the mayhem will continue. That's my take on it.
Now, there's the other side to the argument on the role of local governments in the approach to tackling some of these security concerns. And many have harped on the fact that without the much given autonomy, even with the amounts of security votes governors have, the support is much needed from the grassroots. What do you make of this argument, and how can the local governments play a role in the multifaceted approach to tackling terrorism and banditry in Nigeria?
Thank you so much. You know, the local governments have been inactive in this country for quite a long time because the state governors and the legislature per se, they've made it impossible for local governments to operate independently. The states are enjoying the allocations of the local governments, and government has not helped matters, even when they've tried, because President Tinubu has done something to make sure that local governments are independent, but there's no political will. What the situation is still what it is, even after court has given a ruling that states should leave local governments alone, let their monies be going to them directly, but it has not happened. That's a funny thing. That's a very funny situation. So you can't tell somebody to go and fight without arms. That is this question you tree up now. There's nothing they can do. When the foundation is broken, there's nothing the righteous can do. They're now giving money. How can they tackle insecurity at their level when there's no money? Somebody said this morning on one of the channels that a state in the southeast, that what they give local governments is 5 million, 2 million for salaries, 3 million for security. That's what it is, right? How can you use 3 million to face the challenges of security in a local government? You know how broad a local government can be, and you're using 3 million to chase it, and you know that inside that 3 million, the chairman and the operators of the local government will have their share. So at the end of the day, it might not be up to 1 million naira that will be left for the vigilantes, to buy torchlight for them. You can understand what I'm saying, So what we are saying is that local governments, until this country enables local governments to operate as a separate entity from the states, that is when you can now hold local governments accountable to say, you are given 100 million last month. What have you done with it in terms of security? That's when you can hold them accountable, so that if anything happens in a local government, the chairman can be brought to book and ask, what did you do? The policemen there, the security, the vigilantes, and all of those will now be brought to book, and will now begin to see what do you call it now? Point and counterpoint, where the vigilantes will say, hey, we are not giving anything, we are not giving money. Then the chairman will be held accountable. So until local governments are enabled to operate, you give them their money and they do their allocations in terms of, we are allocating this for security. That is when you can hold them responsible. But as we speak today, it is not possible. The state is still in charge. And something that is happening in Enugu. Somebody said that yes, that Enugu government is giving the local governments what is due them, and we can see what is going on in Enugu. The security situation in Enugu is actually coming down. The local government chairmen are taking charge of their local governments. The other time, one of the local governments in Enugu, chairman was invited to the police station to ask him how some bandits were killed. And of course, the guy wouldn't accept that he knew anything about it. But something happened. He took charge and made sure that those bandits didn't go scot-free. You don't come to my local government council and cause mayhem for me. I will deal with you head on. And you can say that when you have the resources. That is the truth.
All right.
So they should equip local governments, and they will do it.
All right, Mr. Sam, we must appreciate you for taking our time to lend your voice to the discuss this morning. We're wishing you the best of the weekend ahead.
Thank you so much. I appreciate.
Always a pleasure. Now, Mr. Sam Otuoye is the business editor of the New National Star newspaper, one out of a dozen newspapers this morning, leading with two stories. One on the need for electoral reforms following the visit of the EU mission to the INEC chairman's office, with 23 recommendations made, 8 of which INEC says are administrative and they've begun implementation, while largely the rest rests on the table of the National Assembly and they border on constitutional and judicial reforms. He also touched on the second lead on the new National Star, bordering on banditry and terrorism and the need for a multifaceted approach to tackle them. We'll take a break, and when we return, our next guest will discuss more of the political developments ahead of 2027, the power tussle ongoing in the People's Democratic's NWC, and also the position of ex-vice president, a former PDP member, now with the ADC, on his position going into the ADC's presidential primary ahead of 2027.